One of the big things that we're seeing is that there tends to be a split opinion on whether working from home or working in office, suits certain people, whether it doesn't suit certain people, blah blah blah. What we're noticing though is that definitely not having people in our classrooms, I think they're missing that incredibly important social fabric.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Short Podcast. I'm your host, Ross Baxter, and today is episode 112 of this series. Today in the show, we're going to be diving into the world of teaching for education and much, much more, and how you guys can maximize your time through your education. And for that, as always, bring on the main man back on the show again. We've got Ryan Locke. How are you doing, Ryan? Good to have you back.
Hello, Ross. Lovely to be here as usual. When you said 112 and you're fainted there, I was like, I can't believe you've done that many already. Fantastic work, by the way.
Thank you very much. I love a good blather. You know me. I get caught up in the conversation. You can't beat having a good discussion about art. I could talk for days.
Me too. So maybe that's a great combo.
Yeah, it's gonna work. Everyone, as always, if you guys have not checked our previous podcasts with Ryan. I said in the previous one, Ryan was actually my first ever guest to kickstart this podcast and to get everything rolling, to actually just dive into the world of education. And it's great to see that, like Ryan says, I'm now 112 episodes in, so we're going up in the numbers. We're getting there. But today, like I said, we're diving into these topics and using Ryan's knowledge to really help improve your time and how to be more efficient as a student, but also on the teacher side as well. So we're not just going to do just student based. We're going to also focus on how to help your teachers out as well to make your work even better. So it's always a balancing act, understanding both sides of the story, and we will take it from there. But as always, Ryan, I'll let you do introductions. Tell us a wee bit about yourself before we get rolling.
Okay, I'll try to keep it brief because you know me, I go off in tangents almost
okay.
by default.
I'm ready for it.
I've already got one I want to go on. So hello, thanks again, Ross, for having me. My name is Ryan Locke. I am a lecturer in media design at Abertay University, based in Dundee, up here in Scotland. As you can tell from this backdrop, it's very sunny here right now, and not the cold north you've been led to believe.
Yeah.
And as you can see, I've actually got a bit of sun in my face. You see, what else do I do? I'm a leader in digital learning as well at Abertay University. So I take a vested interest in learning technologies and how they're deployed, not just at our university, but across the sector as a whole at all levels of education. I'm also an external examiner for other universities. And overall, I'm a pretty cheery guy that has a keen interest in concept art, 3D design, and visual development.
Like Ryan said, everything that you just said there, I'll put all the description below. So if you guys want to go check him out on social media, you can follow him at Twitter and keep up to date with everything that he's doing. He's also started a new show as well, which we'll dive into later in today's discussion. It's a new show for concept artists and illustrators. Is that correct, Ryan?
It is indeed. It's in the we call the primordial stages at the minute. So we've done a few kind of more private sessions just to kind of test the waters. And again, if it gains some traction and it's definitely got a format that works, then definitely going to open that up to the public.
Perfect. So, like I said, folks, we'll dive into that just so you guys are aware and go check it out. So today we're going to dive into a very tough question to start things off, but I think it's a really important question. And it's something I've learned as well during these podcast episodes. So the first question I want to talk about, Ryan, do you think our understanding of what university degree is got misunderstood? Like the pressures of teaching, etc. Like, what's your thoughts on that? I know that's a big opening question. We're just warming up.
Yeah, it's a gigantic question, and I guess for good reason. I think there is obviously, due to the situation that we're facing ourselves globally, you know, the pandemic and all the problems therein, never mind the sectoral pressures that were there before the COVID crisis. I think a lot of people kind of look at universities critically, as they should. You know, everything should be critically analyzed for whatever reason. Do people misunderstand what degrees are for? Yes, there's probably a possibility of that, but how widespread it is, Ross, I really couldn't tell you. I can only talk from my experience, of course, and obviously, you know, anecdotally from conversations I had or have had with other people in the industry, and of course, you know, in education as well, of course, is that there might be some misinterpretation of what a degree is or what it's supposed to be. But overall, I think from my understanding, people, they kind of know what they're signing up for.
Mm-hmm.
now and again you'll come across the odd person. It's like you worry that they're here for more of a a transaction based model. And I
Okay.
think if there's one thing that maybe not that I could confirm it, but I could maybe suggest that maybe there's an increase in that type of thinking. And I think that is not necessarily the student's fault, or potential students' fault. That might actually be the fault of universities, or at least the university recruitment, and how the language has changed, and of course any of the issues related to things like fees, especially from our UK and international bodies. Obviously a university is a very expensive thing, and people are worried about the amount of debt they might be getting themselves into.
Yeah.
Of course, in Scotland here, of course, students in Scotland do not pay fees. It's all covered by the government,
Yeah, we're lucky ones.
which is, yeah, it's an excellent system, but it has its own pressures too, because of that. It's an interesting thing is for me is that my baseline expectation is that when a student comes to university, it's because they want to study their subject, and it's a subject that they have passion for by default. And I think, and like I say, the vast majority of cases that is certainly true. Might the odd person stumble into a degree that they shouldn't be on? Yes, that happens, and that's perfectly normal. And we just have to do our best to make sure that they find the degree, whether that's with us or with another university, that they should be studying on. There's nobody wants to waste anybody's time here.
Yeah. It's like, I understand it is a massive question to kick things off, but it's the reason why I wanted to bring this up was, out of all the times I've been interviewing people, I've been how can I say it? I've like tried to build a pattern or like a system to kind of get everyone's kind of opinions. Like that's why I bring on a wide range of guests. So I didn't want to just be one sided. Like I really
Oh
wanted
yeah,
to
yeah.
figure out, obviously, right, what could maybe get improved. Like obviously these are all just discussions, but one thing I feel is that there's been this kind of extra pressure just keeps stacking up on teachers in terms of, right, they have to be so up to date with everything, but is that necessarily what education is just about? I feel like it's not necessarily about getting people industry ready. It's about actually getting the question answered, is this what you want to do as a career? Like that's what I feel like for example, when I was in university, you'll know yourself obviously by teaching me, I was switching between environment art, and then in final years it went to character art, and then I finally, through the Disney project, I realized, you know what, it is environment I want to do. And I think university is very focused on helping you try to find your answer. It's not just about learning industry standard techniques, etc. And I think it's getting students to realize that the later years it's all about independence. Like you can learn industry standard techniques, but it's not down to the teacher to supply all of that. Like, do you agree, disagree? Like, what's your thoughts on that?
I think you kind of touched on a few things that I completely agree with. For me, university is transformational.
Yeah.
It's a place that you go to try and understand yourself and what you want to do, career-wise, or even just creatively and artistically. There might be something in you that you're trying to develop, or there's a degree or a specific program that's spoken to you, and you're like, well, I have to do this.
Yeah.
And as you might imagine, most people tend to be relatively career-driven, but not everybody. In fact, a surprising amount aren't to have come across in my time. They're doing it because they felt they had to. This was what's speaking to them, and the job is a second thought. So for me, I think university is not industry, and that's one thing that doesn't get said enough. Yes, people in university want to eventually go into industry, but at university, you're definitely protected from a lot of the kind of brutal realities of real life.
Yeah.
And I say that, but real life isn't always brutal. Sometimes it's fine,
Of
but that
course.
of course depends on where you start, and everybody has a different starting point. So university to me is, in one hand, it's the great equalizer. It doesn't care what background you come from. If you're there, I'll treat all of you equally. And everyone in my classroom or in any other lecturer's classroom, they've got multi-varying ambitions of where they want to go and how far they want to go and how quick they want to go there. So it's about, having this place and this time in your life between, usually young adulthood, not always,
Yeah.
where it is safer to play around with what you might want to do for the rest of your life, where there are less financial implications, less disasters if it goes wrong. If you lose your job, that can be all sorts of consequences down the road.
Of course.
University should be obviously learning skills, but also learning how to work, not just under people, but with people as well. I think that's one of the most, I could talk all day about that subject alone, but
Yeah.
I think, obviously there's gonna be so many topics I mentioned that do come up later, but as we're all working from home or in various states of isolation, one of the big things that we're seeing is that there tends to be a split opinion on whether working from home or working in office, suits certain people, whether it doesn't suit certain people, blah blah blah. What we're noticing though is that definitely not having people in our classrooms, I think they're missing that incredibly important social fabric. Because what we can do is we know, and it's been tested and research has proven that is absolutely vital at primary school and secondary school level.
Yeah.
And I think it's pretty safe to assume that at college and university level, that stuff's important too. We're social people, we're social beings, and of course, learning to interact or be in the same room or be in groups with people, how to work with people you get on with, how to work people you don't get on with is
Yeah.
absolutely vital. How knowing when to shut up and listen, and knowing when to just have the grace and the manners to let someone else have the space, the floor,
Mm-hmm.
and to let their opinions be heard. And I think one thing we know is obviously we do professional projects, and that in many ways, thrived on group interaction. Oddly enough, I think even that started to find it a little bit harder in a work from home conditions, because it's more keyboards and more monitors. It's less face to face. And whenever you take away that kind of normal, healthy human social interaction, you kind of change the dynamic a little bit. So for
Yeah.
me, that's just one pillar of university. For me, it's working with ex-industry professionals, whoever they might be, like myself, or I'll just kind of name drop Ian Donald and all the other fantastic
Yeah.
colleagues that I have. I
I
get very
miss
lucky.
Alberte, man. I miss it. I could just study Alberte for years. It was that good.
That's why I never left.
Yeah, I should just go back. I should just switch. I talked to you obviously on Twitter about. I was thinking about becoming a teacher. I would hear. You never know. I might come back and just teach Alberte. I would love to do that.
Always check the vacancies. That's what I
Yeah,
did.
I will.
So, and I quite hands on, I was going to say, I don't even know the phrase I was trying to go for there, but hands down, believe I work with some of the finest colleagues you can ask for. And I get to work with some of the finest students you could ask for. It's a
Yeah,
fantastic job for me. And of course, there are all sorts of pressures, but ultimately, we're there every day, geeking out over, the same stuff. Every
yeah,
day I talk about concept art and design, visual development, or 3D pre-visualization, or UX and UI design, the stuff that we love and have passion for. And I think that making that a normal, healthy thing that we do in a daily activity, at both a passionate level and a critical level, is absolutely essential.
yeah,
We want everyone to be a good student, but I think a good student will eventually make if you want to say a good worker, but that almost sounds almost too vocational, almost sounds quite robotic.
yeah,
I think, for me, university should be, it's not just about the technical and hardened skills that you leave with, but those soft skills are increasingly valuable. And of course, we want you to be an independent, creative thinker that's able to apply those skills in any condition that you find yourself in. And of course, that's trying to respond at the same time to the changes and shifts in industry, as well as the changes and shifts in education. So it's a very dynamic place and a very dynamic space to be in. So I feel very lucky that I get to do that with the students that I have and the colleagues that I have.
yeah. No, thanks for sharing that, because like I completely agree. It was it's over the years through interviewing and talking to people and trying out, like I said to you before we went live, I've been branching out to teaching around the world and stuff, and learning as I go along from all the mistakes that I've made. However, there's been that common thread of, I feel like there's just this constant pressure, and it's once again going back to this concept of learning how to be more independent. And I've been bringing it up a few times recently on the podcast. At the end of the day, you go to education to try to figure out the important question, which takes years sometimes for us to figure out. It's like, what do you want to do? But by doing that experience and going through, like Ryan's saying, talking to these people, making new friends, and being surrounded by this environment that that you feel yourself, that you can be yourself, and just geek out, just geek out about Star Wars or Star Trek, you name it, whatever it may be, whatever thing you're passionate about. That's what university allows you to do, and it's all about realizing that it's also a patience game. Like, there's no rush. I think there's this pressure that we put on ourselves that we have to have this job straight away. Like I remember when I was going into the end of the last few months of university for fourth year, I actually felt really relaxed. I think everyone else was always thinking about how to get this. I need to get a job straight away. Whereas I was just there. I have my normal job. I'm working on tills. I'm learning how to talk to people. Happy days. Like there's not this pressure to jump straight in. Like, do you think people overthink the job concept right at the end of uni?
Yeah, but I think it's a very natural and normal thing.
Yeah,
First of all, I think, university, among other things, like that we just mentioned, you are there to work as well. And
yeah,
so that, hard work and being tested, I think, are important things in life. And being tested at different levels and to different standards,
mm-hmm.
massively important. But I do think that there's pressure comes from multiple sides to students, but I think the worst is the pressure that comes from the self. Um, and it depends, like if we do a class in third year, I think you may have been there whenever I first did the first version of that lecture, which was about how you define what your success looks like. I'm coming to terms with how fast you find that version of success. Because words like success and failure are woefully inadequate terms for the huge spectrum of what really lies underneath that discussion.
Yeah,
But there's no way around it. There are words that will continue to be used. So I'm like, okay, well, let's use them. But let's define those words for ourselves. What does success look like for me? And then how can I own failure? How do I own it in a way that works for me? So like, first of all, redefining failure in a way that doesn't necessarily mean a horribly destructive form of not getting somewhere that you
yeah,
wanted to get, but also defining success in a way that is beneficial to the point of not, overriding the ego and getting to a stage of kind of realizing that success looks like this, but it takes steps to get there, and that each one of those steps is not success, it's mini successes. And it's like,
yeah.
so it's different for everybody. It's quite a complex lecture for that reason. And it's actually, I think we're due to give that. Actually, sorry, my colleague Finley just gave it last week and did a very, very great job of it.
Great.
But it's an important thing to think about. And it's like going like, for instance, you can't leave university and not get a job in the first week and deem yourself as a failure.
Yeah,
That's destructive behavior, and it will destroy your love and passion for the subject that you have. And just kind of have to step back and realize that pressure to succeed in the, like getting a job is my success. And I'm like, well, that's only one way of succeeding. What are your other ways of succeeding? And realizing that there's probably actually a lot of things that you want to do personally as an artist or as a creator, as a designer, that makes you successful. And that getting work is just one of them. Sure, it's a significant one, but it holds a certain amount of weight. And for me, it's like, if you leave university and you don't get a job in the first week, month, or year,
yeah,
that has nothing to do with your success at all. There's so much luck involved in this industry. The right jobs at the right time, the right interview, and the right amount of people applying for it. You have no idea. There's things that you can't control. Who else is applying for that job? Sometimes you might be contending for a role, one that maybe 100 other graduates are contending for,
yeah,
and one might live very close. And again, they're like, well, we'll take that. It's closer and more reliable, or whatever. Employers do these things. Or they might take someone that they kind of knew. There was a personal relationship there, like, oh, we know him. That's wee Bobby's
that's what happened to me.
cousin.
I got lucky
um,
there. Yeah,
exactly, and so it's there are these unmentionable, uncontrollable luck factors that might be the reason you're not getting work. And because I've seen it far too often in my life, Ross, where it's like, see, the reason people aren't getting work often isn't the quality of their portfolio.
mm-hmm.
You'd be amazed. It's things like, fluffing an interview. Again, nothing to do with their skill or ability with 3D or concept art. It's just a bad interview, and they
Yeah,
weren't in a good place that
a wee
day.
bit of bad luck.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
so there is an unfortunate level of bad luck in this, but there's also room. I don't want to tell students either that it's, nothing's your fault and everything else will fix itself. It's not. I also want students to, to know when to stick their chest out and to show their teeth and to go, I want something, so I'm going to try for it. I'm going to put that bit of effort in. I'm going to make a mental commitment to go after the thing that I want.
yeah,
But also to know and realize that if I don't get it, that's fine. That's okay. Not to be defined by the jobs you don't get. That would
yeah,
be a terrible way of living.
yeah. Nah, because it's. Nah, I agree. It's because like for example, you know what I was like during uni, and I say this many times just to show the mistakes that I made. Like I was a massive culprit of um, overworking, overthinking, and a big story that I told multiple times on the podcast was it was actually when Gordon and Lynn really kind of saved me during my time at uni. And I know it sounds a big statement to say, but when this is just on the topic of fear of failure, like Ryan, my honors project was the fear of failure. Like that's
Mhm.
what my honors project was about, was because I was so afraid of failing. I hated losing so badly that it literally, I don't like to say the word corrupt, but it just was, I don't know the right word, but it was my whole life. Like all I cared about was winning and wanting to do the best I could for my family and stuff, and everything, my brain was just fried. Like I'm not sure if you remember some of the sketches of my ideas of what failure in the presentation I had. Like yeah, I don't think I want to describe it on the podcast, but it was deep. It was a very emotional time, but it was
But
it was through that experience of being at uni and having these teachers to support me, which I was fortunate with the lectures I had, but I was able to learn through by going to uni. You know what? It's okay to make a mistake. There's like I completely switched. Like doing podcasting as well completely changed me. Like such a great way. I was able to go from overworking to actually being a relaxed person. Like how many times did you ever see me relax at uni? I was never the relaxed person. I was just always just working away. I guess that's a good question. What was the biggest mistakes you think I made as a student? Was it, like, if you had to say, if you remember any times that I was getting taught by you?
I think you're a lot like many students, Ross.
Yeah,
Like I think one of the benefits to your person was that you wore that on your sleeve, so it was easy to tell when something was getting to you, and when
yeah,
it's easy to tell, it's easy to diagnose and therefore, help. Now obviously I'm not an expert counselor or mental health, but I don't
yeah,
need to be somebody that you can talk to
of course.
about what you're experiencing at the time. And what's really great there about the example you just highlighted was that your personal experience with what it is, that fear of failure can do to a person.
Yeah,
That makes you already well equipped to understand how you might talk to someone else with the same issues. You imagine if you bumped into a 17-year-old student who looked and felt like you did years ago.
yeah,
You just want to tell them how much better it gets, don't you?
of course. Yeah,
Right? So beyond that, though, your podcast that you mentioned, look at how regularly you're talking about these important things.
right.
That's the solution right there.
Yeah,
If we all talked about it openly and honestly, then we kind of have these dialogues like we're having right now that really helps to make that problem shrink right down and
yeah,
get much smaller. Now, of course, there are times when this area really does tread serious mental health conditions.
mm-hmm.
And that's where teachers and tutors, probably their skills and expertise really does kind of run out very quickly, because we don't want to say things that would send somebody in the wrong direction.
Mm-hmm.
And my advice sometimes, I have to be very careful with it because I'm quite cheeky sometimes. And someone's like, "Oh, I can't draw," and I'm like, "Sure, why are you here?"
Yeah,
you
just
know
for yeah, yeah. I know what you mean. It's okay. I
because
know your personality.
because sometimes you're just trying to cut through someone's personal bullshit, right?
Yeah,
We're all capable of it, but sometimes I have to be careful because that might say it to the wrong person, and they don't turn around and laugh, and you're like, "Oh, you're right. I'll just get on with it." It cuts them down. It cuts them in half, and so I have to be very careful there. And I tend to be reasonably kind of I tend to have great relationships with my students
yeah,
anyway. So um, and most of them understand my personality. I'm very vulnerable in front of students as well because I need them to know. It's like I'm a creative too. I
of
suffer from the
course.
exact same things you do, but I've just more experience with it, and I know that things get better, things get easier, and you also develop personal tools, and rituals and ceremonies to get over these things. And that's the important part. But more than strip all of that away, Ross. Throw it all away.
Yeah,
Important part is talking about it. And of course, and this goes to any student or any young person that's out there. If it's beyond just a discussion, go and get help. Reach out to experts or family or someone that can speak on your behalf, because there are too many serious problems in the world right now.
yeah,
And the last thing a young, bright spark of a creative person needs to be is browbeaten by their own pressure. So it's like, take a break, have a cup of tea, have a slice of cake.
yeah. Got to treat
Drawing
yourself.
I was trying to summarize this before. It's like drawing another superhero will not fix your problems.
Yeah,
It's okay to take a break sometimes, and that's essential. So it's just about realizing that students are under an immense amount of pressure, financially, thinking about their future, the amount of pressures coming from their family, the pressure coming from us as an institution, and the expectation to do coursework and improve themselves, and of course their personal expectations to go places and solve what they see as their great life riddle. And you're like, well, slow down here a minute. The amount of stuff, you touched on this earlier, the amount of stuff that we want to do in university expands, but the amount of time at university stays the same.
of course.
So it's getting crammed in there, and it's like, well,
It's not easy.
something's got to give. So
Yeah,
I love the talking part.
yeah. Sorry, I wasn't trying to cut you off.
No, no, go for it, because you know me, Ross, I'll talk forever.
Yeah, oh, it's always great. That's the reason why it's always great talking to you. It's the fact that because you know me as well. It's like we're always open, and I understand how many students struggle with that. And I think one of the important questions to bring from this actually would be to talk about next is to anyone who's, let's say, mentoring or anyone who is teaching. Like, I know experience plays a big part of this, but what have you learned in terms of identifying when to say, like, how to approach the person? Like, for example, I obviously, as you just said there, as you touched on, some students are very shy. Some people are very just, come on, be brutally honest with me. What do I need to get better at? But is there anything that you've learned, like just for people skills in general, to know how to kind of get better at speaking?
I,
I
it's
know it's not
difficult.
easy.
It's so difficult because I think I have such an ad hoc approach to teaching.
Mm-hmm.
Now there's definitely some reliable stuff. There's a backbone of principles there. Could I tell you what they are? No,
Okay.
but I
Yeah.
know they're there.
Yeah.
And so on one hand, I'm an accidental academic. That's one of my, I'm always honest with people like that. This all happened by accident, like, over a decade ago, and I've loved it ever since. And I'd like to think I'm good at it,
Yeah.
and I get lots of recognition from students and other bodies that I'm doing okay, right?
You're a great
So I'm
teacher.
not worried about that. I'm always
Yeah.
worried about, what I say is like, can I replicate that for someone else? Can I give advice to other people where they could learn from my experience? And I think they can. I know one thing though, I'm not very good at always being able to spell it out. So from my own experience, it's for me, it's getting to know students a bit better, right?
Okay.
And traditionally, if you're with us from first year all the way through to fourth year, then it's about knowing who you are, what your hopes and ambitions are, a little bit about your personality. And classes have only got bigger, so of course that gets harder as well. And the amount of names I have to learn. I always
Oh,
say,
I always forget the names for that always sounds a nightmare. That.
oh yeah, well, I always say to students in first year, it says like for your first year, you're all called you. Let's go you,
Yeah.
you, you. Says now second year, it says like the people whose names I'll know the most by second year are the very good students and the ones who've annoyed me, and they're all like, and I'm being serious.
Yeah.
uh,
There's still
and
you. In
I'm like,
second year, there's still you.
so I'm like, if you want your name to be learned quicker by me, then do something extremely great or
Yeah.
something extremely awful, and I'll figure it out from there. Um,
Genius.
and that led to an influx of hilarious like anime chibi kind of stuff because they knew that would annoy me. I'd done some rants about it. I was like, I've had enough of this chibi stuff. It's adorable, but it's not for me.
Right.
So they do all chibi versions of me, and I was like, okay, I know your names now. Brats.
Being
But
savages.
but I think it's by the time I've talked to everybody on a one-to-one basis about what they're doing, either for their projects or where they've come from, some question I do try to squeeze in now and again is what's their education experience been like so far? Because I'm teaching a big class and people come from different backgrounds with various levels of either drawing ability, 3D ability, or just any creative ability. So
Yeah.
I'm always trying to negotiate what that experience was and where something, what they've been told they're allowed to do, what they're told they can't do.
Hmm.
And I'm always just those tiny conversations and those questions with anyone who'll talk to me. And
Yeah.
obviously, quieter people are very hard to get talking. But oddly enough, some of that's been solved with the COVID crisis. Quieter students tend to type more, which has been
Okay.
great. but I think most students, I'm not getting that one-to-one with them where I'd like to have, in person, and that usually tended to work. So, it's only by knowing people that you can tell when they're not quite themselves. And it's not always obvious. Someone might be suffering and look completely fine, though,
Yeah.
But then how do you tell? I
It's
don't
impossible.
know.
Yeah.
So you just have to ask every now and again. I made a point about it every few weeks. I'm like, how's everyone doing? Now I don't expect you all to answer this, but for anyone who's out there and quietly suffering
Yeah.
from something right now, just know that it's not forever, that you're going to get over it, and that help is there if you need it.
Yeah.
I'm not sure who that's aimed at, but if those words mean something to you right now, then say something to me, either in private or just go and talk to university services. But that might have been what you needed to hear today.
Yeah.
That's all. Saying something that somebody needed to hear is really important, but also recognizing if someone's visibly distressed, that's easier. It's like, well, the book's open on the wrong page. I can just sit down and have a talk and go, what's going on with you? You don't look like your normal happy self.
Yeah.
And that's a risk sometimes, because there's only a few times it ends up in floods of tears, and they're like, whoa, let's go somewhere.
That's
quickly.
what happened to me. It was like I literally when I look back at I try not to laugh at it because it was an important part of my life. But so literally we were in white space, right? And there was literally like Roberto, Elliot, Scott, and Yannick were literally just sitting around me, and then Lynn and Gordon were literally just doing like a review, like going around us as a team. And Gordon asked like, "How are you today?" And I was like, I was about to say good, and I just burst into tears. Like I just went completely gone, because like I was building things up for so long, and I could not hold it in. I was just, and then Elliot just looked at me. He was like, "What has happened to Ross?" Like he was just like so shocked. And it's like the reason why I always tell these things on the podcast is like I understand, just based off what Ryan just said there. Like sometimes it's not easy for people to be like, I'm always open. I just say it as it is. If something is wrong, I'm just going to tell you. I'll be straight up with you. Obviously, I'll always do my best to be as kind and genuine as I can. But like just by suddenly when I opened up, 10 minutes later, I was the most relaxed I was in a year. Like it was that, like it's by doing these things, whether it's like Ryan said, a quick message or a 5-minute chat. Ryan always used to in his class for computer arts practice. One of the great things, based on what he also said there, was literally the first time I met Ryan, he did a whole kind of like conversation about, right, Ross, what do you like? And I was showing him my environment artwork and stuff that I did in architecture and stuff, and he was breaking things down. He was like, this is great, okay, this is things that we could adapt for, etc. And all these discussions made my job a lot easier and just made me more comfortable who I am. So it could be anyone. It doesn't even have to be a teacher. You could talk to a friend or like I said, a lecturer or whatever, just for a few minutes, and it could be game-changing. It was game-changing for me, and I was grateful for everything that they did. From now on the Sure Art podcast, I would like to showcase your artwork on the show. All you have to do to have the chance to have your work on display is share your favourite portfolio piece as an ArtStation link or Vimeo link in the comments section below. Let's get right back into the podcast. This is going to be even more fun. What do you think the future of teaching is going to be? Do you think things are like, and that reaction was, I don't know. He's like, oh gosh.
You have, I think,
have I unleashed something here?
Every kind of teaching academic in the world right now is formulating papers and answers to this one.
Is this a touchy subject?
No, not at all. I think it's great. I think it can get touchy for certain, depending what level of university you're employed at. It can get teaching. I'm a teaching academic, so I'm perfectly poised to answer this question, and it's a speculative question, so I can only suggest answers. But obviously, the big elephant in the room is COVID-19, the pandemic, the working from home, and of course students are learning from home. It's the same thing, they're working from home ultimately. And trying to address the multifaceted octopus demon that this is of not just a question, but just as we move forward, the sector is going to have to wrestle with this one, education as a whole, never mind universities, colleges, primary schools as well, and even, sort of the private education, they've got worries and concerns there too. So it's, and a lot of people are looking at this as a chance or an opportunity to either shake up everything or to start to have a core rethink of the pillars in which education in the UK or the globe or the wider subject of let's say the wider subject, the wider sector in general.
Yeah.
There is there an opportunity to do things, but I think all of it is, I think, quietly and gradually undermined by an overwhelming sense that we kind of all want things to go back to normal. But I do think while that's an ambition, things might go back to whatever normal means. Was normal before good enough? And what's the point in going there? And if not, what can be improved?
That's a good
And also,
question.
what can we keep from the COVID-19 pandemic that we liked? So one of the things I think, I keep saying this to students and staff meetings, I bring it up and to some uncomfortable coughs, which is that from the move to work from home learning, right? Most of us want to go back into classrooms, right? Most of us, all the idea of going to university and doing your work and then leaving, for most of us, it seems appealing and it works. But a lot of students, and I think a significant amount of students, have preferred working from home learning.
Really? Wow.
And so that's going to be a difficult thing to take back off of them. Especially, I noticed that from my perspective, there's been a lot of the quieter students are like, no, I love sitting in my room and learning.
Mm-hmm.
And the idea of going back to university might even cause a sense of anxiety, because the pandemic's not going away. It's still going to be a real thing for a number of years, even if things are slowly returning to normal. Classrooms start to open back up, lecture halls open back up. There's always going to be that air of someone coughed. Who was that?
Yeah.
So the future of education, I think, at the meantime, let's think about in the next year, probably won't look too much different from what we're looking at right now.
Okay.
It'll gradually, we'll aim for normal, take some of the learnings from COVID-19 pandemic, whatever that might be, such as cut down the meetings. Turns out online meetings are fine, they work. There's no point in stuffy lecture halls. If you can lecture online and get the education across, fine. Unless, I want to teach in a lecture hall again, Ross. I love lecturing.
It's the best. Yeah, same.
Right?
I like
it's screaming red faced. It's like, this is a great subject to talk about. I love all that. Theater and performance and engaging people is valuable.
It's the best.
But is it worth risking people's health and anxieties and all that with? Again, we haven't made a decision there, and most universities are, like all universities, are keeping their cards close to the chest because they don't really have the answers yet. Neither do government. No one does. So we're all kind of having to test the water as we go, and of course respond to policy as it comes out. Next is like, okay, what about the next 5 years then? And 5 years tends to cover most people's degrees, right? Plus any resets or masters that they might add on to the end of it, university level anyway. I think things might go back to normal in that we will see the university on-site campus as the practical space where we learn how to work and be together as people in a practical sense. But I imagine things like meetings and lectures might be a thing that are done online. It might be a thing that's only done online at this point.
Okay.
That might free universities up, might do. I'm not sure how this is going to turn out, to use that extra space. You don't need lecture halls anymore. Now, I love lectures, remember, and I love lecture halls. I would never advocate getting rid of them. But I'm trying to think the way university thinks. And they're saying, okay, well, that's space that we don't necessarily need. What could we do with it? Maybe that becomes something else. That might be a benefit. It might be awful. We don't know yet. It's about the willingness to try things, I think, is important here. And then in 10 years, again, it's harder to predict the level of technology that will be available in 10 years. And so for me, it's like, how do we balance, one, measuring student expectation in the next year, 5 years, 10 years of what their educational experience should be? And how do you measure that against the experience of educators and knowing what works? Because what you might want isn't necessarily what works. For instance, like a lot of students want video tutorial now, but the education, like there's research and that doesn't always equate with a better education experience. So there's lots of research still to be done on that front. What's technology and the software going to look like? How do we close things like the digital divide by improving access to the right equipment? People are working from home, Ross, right?
Yeah.
So one student might have a £3,000 gaming laptop, and there's some students don't have a smartphone.
Of course.
And you're like, so how do you equalize that? And whose responsibility is it? Should the university be buying gaming laptops for 90 people in a class? It can't. It could never afford it.
It's too much, yeah.
But also like people's access to broadband speeds. You can't watch a lecture live, and you're losing out on what other people might be seeing. So that's another inequalizer.
Yeah.
So there's all these factors that comes around that sometimes I forget about. But my answer to your question is that I think it will be an enhanced version of blended learning that'll start to kind of pick out what needs to be on site and benefit on a hard skills and sort of soft skills front, which I think is learning to work together. It's that kind of work-based learning model.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the rest will be, what can be done online, and it should be done online if it makes sense.
Yeah.
So not too different. I think things will just creep back to normal, and a few of the advantages will stay.
Thanks for answering that. Amazing sharing all of that, because there's you even brought up a lot of things that even I wasn't even thinking of. Like a lot, we tend to forget about how much impact some of the smaller things actually have. Like one of the, like for example, I remember when things were kicking off for you and you're teaching obviously from home, and you're obviously having to learn how to do video conferences in a way, like recording, so learning new equipment. And then there's also people who are teachers who don't really know that much about technology when it comes to this kind of area. So teachers are obviously once again having to learn a lot of new things as well. So it's making sure that we acknowledge that it's a balancing act between the two. Like how can the teachers help the students, but also how can the students make it maybe easier and acknowledge what the teachers are doing as well. So it's getting that balance in between. And to carry on this question based off what you said, how have you adjusted? Like how do you feel with everything's going on? I know that's another, like, I've seen obviously the tweets and stuff, and it's always been a learning experience. How have you adjusted to it?
I feel that if there was a spontaneous qualification, I that learning to produce online content and deliver it effectively.
Yeah.
I think myself and my colleagues have just earned it, and I don't mean that in an egotistical way.
Mm-hmm.
It was the speed at which we had to do it that got me.
It's mad.
And also, I think again there's another equality thing here. So first of all, I'll tell you what I did, Ross, right? Which was obviously as this hit, obviously no confirmation, but I was off sick with a flu 2 weeks before the pandemic lockdown hit. So obviously the natural assumption is I've got this, I've got COVID, but there was no antibodies test back then. So all the classic kind of, all the symptoms, of COVID. So I was off sick, and then obviously lockdown eventually came in 2 weeks later. So I've been essentially working from home since then. Now, video content is something I've done on some level anyway. I record all my lectures, I record most of my lessons, and I put them online, but that's not the same as producing content for online learning. Those recordings were just what I did in the classroom, so they don't necessarily translate that well to what you need to do from home. But so what I did was start producing content. What a learning curve that was.
Yeah, of course.
Huge confidence dip to begin with, because I like filming me when I don't really care what's going on. It's camera somewhere else. I don't see it. It's just recording. I'm doing my thing in the classroom. Great. When it's doing this, when it's pointing right at me and says like I'm here to record a lecture, I just couldn't handle it to begin with.
Yeah,
it was weird not seeing a field of faces in front of me, and the reactions and the energy I get from that, and the energy we get from each other, and the debate that it can spark up. It was so quiet.
Yeah.
I'm talking to this little dot on the top of my screen and getting no reaction, and like all my jokes don't work, all my anecdotes.
That's so true. Yeah.
Oh man, it was horrible. And it just got worse. And it was like, so I started recording like, screen captures of digital drawing and painting. And what I noticed is what used to take an hour was now taking 3 hours, because I felt I was over explaining everything, just so aware that this content has to work for a huge amount of people, from various levels. And some of these people I've never met before. I don't know what their experience with digital art and 2D is. I'm not sure what problems I'm trying to solve here. So I had to sort of, I ended up recording far too many videos. I burned myself out in the first semester. It was a ton of content. Like we're talking like 80 hours of content or something.
Wow. Yeah.
By the time you do the
That's as a
lectures,
lecture. Gosh, right, okay.
yeah, the
Yeah.
lectures, the lessons, the recorded feedback sessions, all of that stuff was like it was close to 90 hours of stuff like
Yeah.
recorded and produced. Um, and it's the quality at the start was very high because we're spending time on it. As the semester went on, its quality went down. I was like, I just got to get this done. And I was talking to the students the whole way through this, and I was like, does this still work? And they're like, yeah, it's fine. Don't worry about it. I was more worried about the content than they were. I got to the point where I was like, Ryan, they were like, Ryan, it's okay. Stop. Everything's fine. We know what we're doing. So okay. And that's like, I'm someone who's reasonably technologically savvy. So think about someone who's been teaching, and I don't want to be ageist about this. There's no point, that's not the ambition, but there has to be some thought and process given to people who are like, maybe they're towards the end of their career and they're being told you need to record stuff and they had no idea.
Yeah, of course. It's literally, learning a whole new thing from scratch. It's getting put on the spot as well, and you got a time limit. That's the worst. Like, you're literally just getting told you have to learn this or nothing's going to work. Like, that's the worst feeling ever.
And there was, obviously, I think the very start of the pandemic, whenever tensions were high, the discourse between, I think, some aspects of studentdom and aspects of teacherdom or lecturedom, they seemed a little bit, there was friction there almost. And I was like, can everyone calm down here and realize that we're literally all in this? It's the first time, I think, in a long time where students and teachers find themselves in the same boat.
Yeah.
And I'm like, so it's just like, there's enough life rafts here. Calm down, everyone. We're all getting off.
Just like warfare.
If Professor Tupplepenny, who's been teaching this subject for 45 years, doesn't know how to record a video, it's not really her fault. She's never had to do it, and all of a sudden she does. The technology has existed there. But so you give them a software tutorial and they're like, I don't know what you're doing. And so it was about patience. There was never enough time for us to flip to online in a way that would have been satisfactory for all aspects of teaching. But seeing some of the walls that were climbed, both on the student front and on the teacher front, has been amazing. It's been largely a success. Not everywhere, though, Ross. Not going to pretend that there was no fires or disasters.
Of course.
There were. And I do think that where students have the power, they need to make their voices heard, and they need to make sure they're getting responses from their universities or other educational institutions, and to make sure they don't let an issue go if it's something they feel enough about. Because the last people who have any power in university are lecturers. They control your modules. They don't control necessarily the program or the university. So make your voices heard. So I'll say.
No, thanks for sharing that, because there's I always say, like, I'll keep saying it today and every podcast that I'll ever do, it's acknowledging, like, being realistic as well. At times, like, yes, I understand as a student, like, for example, I've got student debt as well. I used to be a student, of course, and I understand sometimes we set these standards in our brain of this is what I expect to be taught and at this level, but then you have to relate it to the other factors as well that we're discussing here. Like, it's once again, it's acknowledging what can we actually achieve within this time, and then adjusting from there, and not just saying, wait, why am I not getting taught this, or why do we not have this stuff set up? It's like, we're all adjusting for this massive thing that's it doesn't just happen in a day. It's a patience game that happens.
I think there's a combination of various perspectives, and there's advice from all perspectives coming to students, right?
Yeah.
I've seen students, remember, the vast majority of students are hardworking,
of course,
happy, getting on with a job. And discontent or even, overpraise are on the very small categories, right? But I've students who are comparing their work to industry professionals of 40 years or more, and wondering why I can't teach them to be like that.
Yeah.
I mean, well, your expectations, not are they just too high, they're unreasonable, and they're also insane.
Yeah.
It's like, first of all, I asked you to draw a bike last week and you couldn't do it.
Yeah.
So let's focus on why you can't do that. That's where I'll help you.
Mm-hmm.
I'll bridge the fundamental level stuff to the intermediate stuff, and we'll get you through it. If you're not doing work that looks like Feng Zhu's by the end of
Yeah.
university, you're not a failure. You're like everyone else. That's an insane thing to hold yourself to.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's I've seen it, there's a lot of working professionals who give great advice, but there's some who give bad advice too,
Mm-hmm.
right? In how you're supposed to deal with or tackle, perceived issues either on your teaching programs or on online content. And I think it's got to know where you're at, whereabouts, where's your skill level right now,
Mm-hmm.
right? And if you think a tutor in the space of one module in 1 year can teach you how to be like Feng Shui, then that's insane. No one's going to do that for you.
Yeah.
One, the amount of work it would take to do is unhealthy.
Mm-hmm.
It would be unethical, but also it's compared with the other skills that you're learning as well.
Like
There's
personal
a
skills.
whole host of things.
Yeah.
So like I teach on computer arts, right? Computer arts is not a concept art program. It is not a 3D program. It is not an animation program. It's an all program. So it's a generalist program, and that's its strength and arguably its weakness.
Mm-hmm.
But we don't pretend to be anything else. We're like, this is computer arts. In this program, you will do a multi-layered, you'll take a multi-faceted approach to computer arts, meaning that in first and second year, you'll try out a bunch of different things with the idea that as you get into third year and fourth year, you have a much more specialist approach.
Yeah.
So that's where we want people to be and what they want to do. And for the large part, the reason we don't deviate from that formula too much is because it works.
Yeah. It generates results. You see
exactly.
You see what happens with jobs, etc. Obviously, I saw what happens every year at the end of the year show. Yes, I was fortunate by going to Aberdeen and the places I've studied at. I get it. There's many people probably listening right now who don't have what we have, if you know what I mean, like, or the teaching level that I was given. But there is that concept. That's why I said right at the start that I have I really value independent learning. Like, for example, I'll keep saying him because he's a great friend of mine, and he's one of the most talented people I ever met, Yannick. So when we were studying, you could see when people saw Yannick's work, they were just like, oh my gosh, that's amazing, you know what I mean? But people would compare themselves to Yannick. And even I made the mistake of sometimes comparing myself to Yannick. I was like, oh, let's go make some spaceships like Yannick. But it's once again, it's like, Yannick was, first of all, 10 years older than me. And it's just like, he's been working his butt off for years. So why am I giving myself the added stress just to compare myself to someone who's been doing it longer and he's incredible at what he does? We have to realize that university is all about working together no matter what. And I was a big culprit of making this mistake. Like I said earlier, all I cared about was compare myself to others, and it was my downfall. And then I had my resurgence, or whatever you say. I finally learned to not do that anymore. But yeah, you have to always work together as a team.
I think no one wants to hear that the way they're thinking or the way they approach something might be destructive or counterproductive to their own objectives. And so it's good to lay it out sometimes and go, actually, that way of thinking isn't good for you, and it's going to come back and hurt you.
Mm-hmm.
And what's important in education is the room to fail and to feel hard and feel fast with, again, as I was saying earlier, no real consequences. The worst thing you can do at university is maybe reset a module. And very, very, very rarely do people actually fail a program and get kicked out. That is such a rare thing, because the system is built to make sure that you're supported and reinforced, right?
Mm-hmm.
Not everybody will feel that way, but it's there. It's there to be used and to be. If you aren't communicating with staff or with other people, it's hard to help people. So that's see it now and again. There's people who go missing quite on purpose, and you're like, "Where have you gone?" They're like, "Don't talk to me." And you're like, "What's wrong?" Everything. You're like, "How can I help?" You can't, and you're like, "Oh, well, I'm not sure how to help you then." But it's the energy and positivity in a learning environment, to me, is the secret, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is making sure that we're talking about the right things the way we are now, knowing that students realize that it's like a culture of comparison is hurtful. Don't be competitive too early. Wait till later to be competitive.
Mm-hmm.
redefining what success and failure is on your own terms, and having the confidence and strength to do that through good conversation is important, and that's valuable in all sorts of things. And this is all going on while you go. I think hard academic lecturing content is important. Writing about a subject that you know and love, making things that are important towards building a portfolio that's in a career that you want. That's the university is you're doing a lot of things there at once, as well as building connections. The big one I was saying, talking about peers earlier, but you're building connections with a host of people who will be in that industry one day. Yeah. For instance, we can pick a huge hand. It's not a small number of people in your class. It's almost most of your class are out there working across the world, and some of them at senior level already in the space of 5 years of their studio, whether that's in game design, UI, UX, film, animation, and VFX. That's the people you're building connections with. That's healthy. That's what it's all about. And so, I'm always with students is like, ignore the mass dogpiling of negative feedback and content that you might find online. I dare you to be a happy and positive person that sees goodness in what you're doing and what others do.
There's so many things you've raised there, right? So there's an interesting discussion, right? So you said this is just going back a few minutes in discussion. So you said something which has made me think a lot. So obviously I've been doing these podcasts for a long time. However, doesn't mean I know obviously everything. I don't. I am far from it.
No one does.
Exactly. But the one thing I feel that I thrive at, and it's the thing I care about the most, is I love helping people. It's the thing that I just care about the most. There's nothing better than, I always see it when you were teaching as well, Ryan, but there's no better feeling, right, than when somebody who's shy or nervous and then suddenly just blossom into this full geek out mode awesomeness of hype, and so they just be themselves. Like, that's the best feeling ever. But the point I wanted to raise here is, and this is something that I'm still learning from, is like, so I bring on guests because they have more experience than me. And yes, I'm learning all the time in that. But like, that's the value this connections that we're talking about brings. Like, by building up and talking to people and getting over the hump of being, yes, like, we all have moments when we're shy, and I get that. And some have it a lot worse than others. But by talking to people, you begin to just branch out. Like, if you think about all the people I've now had the pleasure to talk to, and because of that, and because I'm being incredibly fortunate by talking to these people to share their story, I've never run out of work. I know that sounds a big, bold statement, but it's because of people helping each other I've been able to maintain my work, and I've been grateful for that. So add value, help people, and give back to those who help, because you never know, like how like what Ryan just said there as well, is like for example, I said Yannick's a great friend of mine. By us helping together, we've been able to help each other in our own careers. Same with Shuval, same with all the people in my class. It's by maintaining these relationships and working together as a team, you could get a new job. You never know. Something could come up and they might be like, "Hi Ross, something's came up here for environment art to do sculpting. I don't know, furniture that I love." Perfect. But simple as that. I know that's a very simple way to put it, but you know what I mean.
No, I think I sent a student recently. It was last year. They were absolutely raging about something. We didn't have a particular piece of software.
Okay.
A very expensive piece of software used by about 4 people in Scotland.
Right.
So, we don't have it, and we're not going to have it. And I was like, I don't think you're upset about the software. I think that's what you're focusing on. And I was just talking away to them, and just like angry about everything. And this is just one person, I'm like, there's lots going on in their life too. And I'm like, I'm just trying to get to I'm not trying to dig, I don't want to know, because that's up to them to share. I'm just like, what are you really upset about here? And it was just, one of these, you come across it now and again, someone who's just vibrating with anger and frustration, and everything gets lashed out at. And I was like, and I just said to him, so I was like, have you ever helped anyone?
Yeah.
when he scowled at me, like, what does that mean? And it's just like,
Yeah.
it's just wondering. So it's like, says everything that comes from you is about what's not being done for you.
For you. Yeah.
And that's fine. That's okay. It's a perfectly acceptable position. And if there's, again, I'm there to find out what I can do for them. So it's like, I want to help you. I'm here to help.
Mm-hmm.
So like, the conversation's the first part of that. But I just wanted to know if they'd ever tried helping someone. And the reason is I actually don't care if they've helped someone or not, Ross.
Right.
I just wanted to know if they could think for a second empathetically from outside their own current perspective.
Yeah.
Because it jolts them out of it for a moment.
It's
and they were like, no, I haven't.
Yeah.
And as soon as they say that, I was like, no, trust me, I'm not here to concur. I'm not trying to put people into charity work here. Like,
of course.
Hi, my name is Ryan. Have you helped someone today? You got to go do it. It's
yeah.
not going to I was just like, this was a great conversation. Now we went away. I think this student and I actually had a pint afterwards.
Perfect. Great.
It was a good, productive conversation. But I was just like, he came back to me. Why did you ask that? And I went, because you were so inside your own head there. I wanted to just jolt you the hell out of it.
Yeah.
And realize that what you're experiencing is obviously having an effect on you, how you're perceived, and your relationships with your peers and anyone else in your life. And no one needs to be that angry. It's not good for you.
Yeah.
Now, of course, all the usual stuff. If this is something that's seriously affecting you, then that might have an actual medical edge to it, then I'm going to take you to see someone and get the proper help. Yeah. If not, is a conversation going to fix this? And it was one of those things was like conversation helped, and I think they did go and seek further help after that, and it was good. I got a thank you from them, weeks and weeks later, and I was like, that was good. But it was something about that, realizing that I think it's an inexperience thing.
Mm-hmm.
How do you get out of your head when you're trapped in there by your own anger at things, and realizing that sometimes somebody might be lashing out at something. It's not really what they're lashing out at. So it was a good conversation to have, and I think they went and pirated that piece of software anyway. Not that I would ever advocate for that, but it was a solution for them, and I loved that kind of that solution finder. I just looked at it. Brilliant! You found a solution.
Yeah, you found a solution.
Don't tell me how. I don't know. So
brilliant. Important. No, thanks for sharing that, because that ties into a big reality check that I got into my life, and I've shared this many times. So, like I said, competitive nature inside me used to always get the best of me. Like I always just used to like it's weird if I had to compare myself to when I was in uni and then to where I'm now. I'm like two completely different people. Yes, I still have that desire to want to do well in life, but I'm no longer. So I used to be obsessed with well, I don't like the word obsessed, but I was obsessed. But so I was always listening to like motivational stuff. Like I always used to watch Michael Jordan and Kobe Bryant, like athletes, and just listening to like kind of hype soundtracks, to believe it or not. Like that was my music for the whole day, and then I'd be listening to that while running. So in my head, all I had was like wanting to get ahead, but I forgot to think about like how else could I add value to somebody else, help them, and by helping them in the process, I've learned as well. Like that's how my podcast has changed everything for me, because, and it'll be the same for you in teaching. By helping others, you learn through their mistakes and also your mistakes, and then as a result, you get there quicker. That's why I love reading so much, because people are sharing all their mistakes in one book, and they're basically just giving you on a pedestal, just saying, here, this is the mistakes I've had. You can learn from this. Like that's the beauty of it.
But do if you do it right, Ross.
Yeah.
It pays itself forward.
True.
You're helping make better people.
Yeah.
And again, that's another one of those. Even as I said, I'm always aware that can come across as a wee bit preachy.
Yeah.
It's never the intent.
Yeah.
But it's definitely true. Help someone the right way, listening to them, having empathy for their situation, and realizing that you too are vulnerable and have maybe had some experience in that, and that you still were able to overcome it, and you've helped them overcome a thing, whether that's a creative, technical, or even sometimes life issue.
Yeah.
Watch that'll change them just enough to make them want to change someone else. And that's, to me, that's the butterfly effect of good social relations.
Yeah.
You create that effect, you create that room, and so like it's trying to, for instance, the online world can be extremely toxic, right?
Yeah.
Um,
That's why I'm getting a bit put off at Twitter at the moment. I'll just say that. Like,
oh,
I'm not.
horrible.
Like here. I'm not sure if I wanted to talk about this, but when I saw I keep forgetting what's called. Is it NFTs?
Yeah,
Like I
I've never
wasn't
in my life seen.
so much anger, but it's something new. It's like I was so confused. Like I'm not even an expert on it. I have no idea. Like I did a podcast about briefly for one question,
Yeah,
and I was like, why is there so much hate already? Like there's
yeah,
yeah, it's a touchy subject. We'll see what happens.
yeah. I've never. In the last year, the fallouts on art Twitter alone
hmm
have been monumental. And I think sometimes it blows the mystique away. Sometimes you realize some people really are there just for shameless self promotion. That's fine. Thumbs up for me. Nothing wrong with that.
Yeah,
But don't pretend you're Mr. or Mrs. Nice Guy. Whenever
yeah.
I've seen some of the stuff you just posted and the dramatic absolutism on display,
hmm
and condemning people before they even knew what things were, was like, what's going on here?
Yeah.
So this is, it was a bit of pearl clutching going on there, and I was like, calm down, everyone here. Can we figure this out? Things are starting to settle now, but
Yeah.
the blacklisting, the block lists, the name and shaming, it was like, they're not murderers.
Of course.
you know, some people are just they stumbled across an income. They're trying to figure it out like everyone else, and
hmm
some of them have figured it out and went, "Nah, not for me. I'm out." Some people are sticking with it. But whatever your position on it is, that is not how I wanted to see an industry react.
Yeah.
And you're right, it was vicious at one point, and I'm glad it quickly seemed to resolve itself.
Yeah. It's kind of disapparated. Fingers crossed. Hopefully, it doesn't come back.
But
But
again, it still touches on that thing, which is like, it sure feels good, I'm sure, to
mhm.
be royally righteous on Twitter. The same way it might be to be righteous in any online community, whether it's Discord, over an email. I think there's something about what, the social media era has done to us
Mhm.
that I think is very, very much worth talking about in how we want to be heard. And
Yeah.
I think a lot of the time it's foot stamping.
Yeah.
I have an opinion, and you're like, that's fine,
Yeah.
but I have an opinion too, and
Of
you
course.
have to create the space to hear that if you want yours to be heard.
You just reminded me of an incredible thing that Stephen Fry said. So I was watching this. Maybe you've seen it. It was so good. So Stephen Fry was on the Graham Norton show, right? And he was talking about his it might even be a year ago, but he was talking to Nicole Kidman about one of his new books called Hero. So it's a Greek book, and he was talking about how in the book, so when he was writing the book, how all the ancient gods and all people in ancient Greece would literally surround themselves around a fire and talk, like share their stories in person and stuff, and then how we've lost that basically over time with social media. How a simple conversation, like for example, another reason why I love doing the podcast, like I get to talk to people for a proper conversation. Like I'm talking to you right now, a genuine conversation, and there's no music in the background, there's nothing else, we're just talking. And that is so powerful, and getting that across to people just is, like, I think is crucial. And like, to go back to kind of link this all together, like, yes, we're all entitled to our opinion, but it's like realizing that you don't just like instantly hate on somebody's opinion just because you think it's wrong. Like, yes, there's a lot of things that are wrong in the world. Of course, we learn from our mistakes. That's part of life. But it was interesting when I heard Stephen Fry say that. It's like having just more discussions and trying to be a wee bit more open to things and just having a good talk.
Basic manners, Ross.
Yeah, even better put. Yeah, basic manners.
It's our the social fabric of our species is almost built on listening to each other.
Yeah.
And social media changed that because it's now just millions of voices talking, and we just choose which ones we want to hear.
Yeah.
Rather than if we were around the campfire, we kind of have to hear each other out.
Yeah.
And I like that. Now, obviously, you don't want to distract your podcast onto a big social media rant, but
no, it's okay.
I'm an extremely suspicious person of social media.
Yeah.
And I use it, I only use Twitter, though.
Yeah.
I Twitter's just got a great connection to industry. There's lots of great people on Twitter, even despite some of the fiery voices that can kind of pop up now and again.
Mm-hmm.
And I tend not to actually present my opinion on Twitter because I'm at that point where it's like, on anything, I'm like, how informed am I really? On certain subjects, I'm very informed.
Mm-hmm.
But it turns out that's not the hot topic anybody wants to talk about on Twitter. So I think it can be a really positive, happy, and wonderful place when people aren't just shouting, epithets at each other. And
Yeah.
it's okay if we can just get past that, calm down, everybody, and realize that actually, you know, just hear people out before you judge them, right? And just
Yeah.
way too much judgment. And it's like, let's just simmer down here. And
Yeah.
don't get me wrong either. There are people who quite rightfully have earned every piece of judgment they get.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong there. Judge them into a fine paste as
Yep.
far as I'm concerned. But
Dub.
some random artist you've never heard of is like, hey, I'm trying to sell some NFT artwork, and someone's like, I hate you.
Yeah.
You're trash. You're killing the world.
Yeah.
You're like, well, that's not helpful. And you would never, ever do that in real life. Well, some people would, but most people wouldn't.
Yeah.
Why? Because we're polite. We have manners, and we'd hear each other out,
Mm-hmm.
and we'll try to hear each other's perspectives.
Yeah. I think this is important. So I was actually glad you mentioned it because I pretty much deleted a lot of things on social media. So I only have YouTube and Twitter, and like I was even contemplating deleting Twitter because even though one of my jobs is content creation, like teaching people content marketing, etc., and building their brands, however, we get so like distracted, like we've just said here, by the online world that we forget about the things that matter most. Like I always make sure to prioritize talking to my family as long as I can. Like I make it a habit of just phoning people. Yes, I know we have all different levels of things in life that we just can't keep up to. We can't keep up with. I always lose my words there. I almost lost it. But it's just making sure it's like that balance. Like balance is such an important word. Like I deleted like basically my Instagram. I deleted my Facebook, my ArtStation account. Like I used to be obsessed with scrolling an ArtStation, and I didn't like that addiction. So I just stopped it. Yes, you guys might love it. That's okay. That's okay. If you like it, great. But it's just getting that balance. Right. So we've talked about a lot of great subjects today. So thank you as always, Ryan, for your time. There's 2 more questions before we get into the madness. So first of all, let's talk about your new talk show that you've started. So obviously we talked it briefly at the start. Mm-hmm. Tell us a wee bit about it, and is there any way people can find it, or like what's your plans? I know you're just obviously getting it going.
So the current plan is essentially to explore this area. So
mm-hmm.
Sadly, I've got no real sort of public links or sort of show names that I could give to you yet, but
yeah, it's okay.
I think maybe even a little bit inspired by yourself for sure. That's definitely true.
Oh, but, awesome! Thank you.
But more than anything, Ross, it was I recently I have my Discord channels for my classes, and one of them in particular from last semester was just filled with gold and positivity and students being friggin' awesome, right?
Yeah, that's brilliant.
Just being awesome. And I was like, I can't go and delete this server just because it's over.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, so what we're going to do is we're going to convert this server into the a student Discord that I'm going to kind of oversee. But I want it to be a community. I don't want me to do all the work. It's not a service, it's a it's a participation based system, right? We all have to participate to make it work. But it's about a place where we can sort of keep that passion for the 2D art forms of illustration, viz dev, and concept art and design. So that's what I renamed it to. And then I was like, no, we're going to invite students from 1st, 2nd, 3rd, and 4th year into this.
Okay.
And see if it grows and sort of start to grow up. But, essentially that was done. Then 2nd semester starts. I'm busy as a blue bottle with a lot of meat lying around. I'm like, I've got to focus and stuff. So I didn't really time to really do much on it. And I was been thinking about it ever since. And I was like, do you know what? Things still, this was not, we're getting to this stage where, we're 6 or 7 weeks into this semester. Lockdown's really getting to everybody. We're all feeling it. And I was like, you know what? More than anything, it could really do with cheering people up a bit.
Yeah.
Because their anxieties about future work and their own degree programs and all this jazz is probably a little bit too high right now. And you know what was missing from everything? Some industry voices. So
Right.
the idea was like, I'm going to do this without Abertay's permission or my university's permission. I have no budget. I have no nothing. I've only got goodwill and nice manners.
Yeah. That's
So
all you need.
um,
You just need a wee bit of
exactly.
confidence to get do something. Like that's the great thing about it.
Yeah, and like the big thing was just trying to find willing participants, people who maybe recently graduated in the last sort of 5 to 6 years, that want to come and talk about, not just that classic your journey thing,
Yeah.
but also just some of the things that universities are doing well or aren't doing well. I want to hear that because then I can change what I do. But that list gets long, as you might imagine. So
Yeah. It
there's only
adds
so
up.
much I can change. And like, it's hi, can you teach me how to paint a fairy dragon? And you're like, oh, this fairy dragon's not the problem.
Yep.
You can't draw an eye.
Yeah, you need
So
fundamentals
uh,
first.
let's get on with this. But jokes aside, students are pretty damn talented, and the stuff that they're doing is just incredible. But anyway, I was like, so the first up I got Roberto Mackin and Rory.
Oh, nice, good.
You know who I'm talking about, yeah.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
And from Dalala, so they came on and they were just great, absolutely fantastic. Just hearing from them.
And then was Sophie
And
was second.
Sophie and Shuvo were second.
Oh,
Yeah.
you got Shuval as well.
Yeah. So doing it kind of by studio. So that was from Mediatonic, and obviously just they're quite a big name all of a sudden because
Yeah.
of Fall Guys, and the idea was not to grill them, but to have a podcast style conversation, just on Discord with a room full of students just listening in and asking their own questions as well. And it worked way better than I thought it would. It was pretty fun. And I've got a couple more lined up, but they're bigger hitters than I was hoping to get. So like trying to find the time for them to come on is different. So the idea being is if I can get that to work, then I'm like, well, why shouldn't I go public with this and
Yeah,
let any student get the benefit of this?
of course.
Since it's done with no money, there's no funding here, and just finding willing talk participants. And once we've got a list of studios and names in there, then maybe it'll kind of gain some traction. So
Yeah.
essentially kind of cleaning that up, getting the production, the content figured out. But I'm going to run it, maybe if I can do this 2 or 3 more times and feel good about it, then I think I'll have the will to kind of turn into something bigger and better.
That's great. No, that's awesome. It's yeah, like I said, it's by starting something, like it takes a lot of confidence, or just it takes that having that guts to just take that leap. I've shared, like, one of the things that I said. I always laugh at this now because when I reflect back, I'm like, it's really interesting how some people, how people react. But I remember, I've told this story many times. Is there was this person who once commented on one of the really first podcasts, and were like, I don't know if I want to learn from a student because obviously at the time I was a student. However, it's like, yes, people will say a lot of things, but it takes that confidence to just go, you know what, I'm going to try something new.
That
Yes.
comment
Yeah.
instantly signals that they're not ready to learn.
Yeah. It was interesting because to me, it's not about, like, I think a lot of people get confused still these days sometimes by experience and age. It's the most important thing, and this even applies just to marketing. I know we're not talking about marketing, but topic is the most important part. Like, if it's not the right topic, it's not going to help. So as long as I'm bringing on the right topic, so for example the right guest, then I don't need to know the answers. I just need to be comfortable with asking questions.
Yeah.
So if you guys are tuning in right now and you're maybe wanting to build something, or if you're a teacher, you're wanting to start something different, or a student, it doesn't matter what anyone else thinks. As long as you take the leap to just go, you know what, let's give this a shot, because it might turn into something that you enjoy. Like, I never for a million years thought I'd be eventually turning this into a job. Like, all I care, like, my dream is just to build Hogwarts. One day, I don't have a clue. I'll win cryptocurrency award somehow. I'll hopefully win the lottery to build it and keep helping students. That's all I care about. But yeah, I'm all for it. I can't wait to see what you do. I didn't know that Shuval was involved as well, so that's great. I'll have to message him this week.
Yeah, the big thing, Ross, was just hearing concept artists talk about their job.
Yeah.
It wasn't them having to present their work and how they made it. It wasn't a tutorial on today we're going to learn how to paint a wheel for a car.
Yeah.
Nothing like that. It was just what happened to you? How did you get to where you got to?
Yep.
What's it like? What still scares you about the world and the industry? And just humanize it. That's the big objective to me, is humanize concept art, because it can seem like it's very over there
Yeah.
rather than down here on earth where it actually is, and it's a job done by real people with real fears, hopes, and desires.
Yeah. No, thanks for this. So, most importantly, as always, you'll be seeing obviously Ryan's social media on the screen. So if you want to keep up to date with what he's doing, you can follow him on Twitter. All links, as always, down in the description below. So if you want to take part and get involved and check out what he's doing, yes, there's no links yet finalized, but it's something to obviously keep your eye out and get part. It might be something exactly for you. So it is time now for the madness, Ryan. It is the fun part of the podcast where we ask the most random questions from sci-fi films, sci-fi episode scenes to Star Trek. You name it, we're going to be geeking out about it. So I hope you're ready, Ryan.
The first part of the podcast where I've got the fear about what you're about to ask.
Favorite TV show of all time?
Oh, of all time.
Is there
I
one?
really struggle. I struggle with this one because there's so many, but it has to be Star Trek for me, right?
Okay, awesome.
No way around
Okay.
it, but that's a lot of TV shows.
Yep.
There's Star Trek that I cannot stand.
Yep.
And there's Star Trek that I couldn't love anymore than I already did.
Same.
And as Star Trek goes on, like, it changes what I love and what I don't love. And there's aspects of the new Star Trek that I adore. Loads of it I could throw away and go,
Discovery.
I think you've missed the point of Star Trek.
Yeah.
And what I'm happy to see is that Star Trek's kept its progressive message alive.
Mm-hmm.
Bloomin' love it. There's no excuse or cover for a bad script. Sometimes you need to kind of just get on with telling a story and keep that coherent and well told. And for me, I really do love the actors and the look and the style that they've taken. But I'm a Trekkie at heart. I want culture.
Yeah.
I want more culture. I want to know how we handle things in the future, and I don't want to retread old ground. And I don't want it to be too nihilistic either. I want it to be hopeful about where humanity's going.
Mm-hmm.
That's what Star Trek was always about for me. It was like, here's a TV show about a version of humanity that's happened to solve most of the current problems to do with whether that's climate, war, poverty, currency, and capitalism, blah, blah, blah.
Mm-hmm.
And we're now out in the galaxy exploring. Obviously, Next Generation was, very much directly influenced by Roddenberry's influences. And of course, at one point they take it off him to make it even better. And then we get to something like Deep Space Nine, which is, I have converted, I think it is now the ultimate representation of Trek. There's nothing better than Next Gen, than I think it's Next Gen, Voyager, and Deep Space Nine. I think are the trio for me.
This one's gonna be a tough one for you. I'm pretty sure it is. Favorite sci-fi movie scene? Is there a sci-fi movie scene, or even a few?
It's really cruel.
I'm sorry. Here, you think about all the previous guests. Like yesterday, right? I was asking like just animation, just pure evilness in a fun, entertaining way, though. In a fun, entertaining way. You're like, how dare you, Ross?
There's so many, and I'm like, I'm always trying to distill. For me, I'm a big, for sci-fi is part of my academic outlook. I firmly believe that sci-fi plays an important role to us as a species, because it's the imagination space.
Yeah.
It's the imagination space where we play with where we can go, where we can, and who we can be, and that's an important part of our, I guess, the philosophical understanding of ourselves and what we're capable of being, for all sorts of reasons. And so, I try to think of a scene where that's summarized, and I can't. So instead, I'm going to stick with something ultra cheesy, and monumentally probably underrated. There's a single tiny scene in the very first Alien film.
I knew you were going to say Alien. I knew you were going to say Alien.
And well, I write a lot about Alien.
Yep.
I love it. And I try to avoid all the classic Alien scenes, like chestburster scene, blah blah blah.
Yep.
Chestburster scene for all sorts of reasons, been talked to death about. There's loads of scenes in that film um, that are fantastic for all sorts of reasons and have layers to them, and they don't get to get talked about a lot. Two in particular, one where Ash is obviously he is, and this is probably quite on the button for the sort of time that we're in it right now. But there's a part where he's tossing Ripley around quite violently because she's discovered that his mission all along was to protect the alien and get it home. Spoiler alert, film's been out for 40 years.
Yep.
So she obviously tries to alert the rest of the crew. He takes umbrage with that and decides he's going to toss her around robot style. He's got her by the hair, he's throwing her about. And obviously at this point, we're starting to realize that Ripley might be the protagonist. And so we're really empathizing with her. And then probably rolls the newspaper up and he obviously chokes her with it on this desk. And what you notice on this desk are, and I can't believe it took me this long to work it out, but there's loads of pornographic pictures of women.
Right.
While he's got this, sorry to go here, but phallic object stuffed in her mouth. And it's a deeply disturbing image, right?
Right.
It's essentially a non-intercourse rape scene, right? Which ties categorically to some of the core themes of this movie about male fear of pregnancy and ergo responsibility, biological responsibility, and the idea that the face hugger that impregnates the man that bursts out of his chest with a very phallic like alien, like these are all core issues. And Ridley has talked about all of these. They're definitely there. And then a very kind of strong image, which was, of course, of Ripley, getting choked out underneath this collection of pornographic images of women. And it clicked me instantly. I was like, that is crazy how much I never seen that before.
I didn't see that either. So this is
crazy. And it ties exactly what the film is. And then second to that is I think there's a scene where the alien transitions across the screen. It comes from this side of the screen, and it travels in slow motion to that side of the screen for just a few seconds.
Okay.
But it's got all the flashing lights going off, and it looks like a total nightmare.
It just terrified.
Perfect. And I've seen that image since I was a kid. And closing my eyes, I can see it pixel perfect. It's tremendous. And as the film goes on, we notice the film goes from the vision of 4 different concept artists, as we know. It goes from that industrial, first of all, the film opens, with that beautiful high sci-fi scene of them waking from their birth cribs with beautiful futuristic vision of what sci-fi should look like.
Yeah.
And they transmerge onto this like big oil rig, this industrial thing. And then they go to this planet that's made of organic objects with all sorts of horrible shapes, and then get back to the ship. The ship then gradually begins to become the aliens' homeworld. So we notice that as the film goes on, the metal becomes more and more. There's more pipes, there's more steam, there's more water running down the walls, there's more chains like guts. And as the film goes on, we gradually we basically transcend into this aliens living its own hunting ground, and it's fantastic to watch happen.
Just like you describing that is like so awesome, because it's like that's the part that we as artists love the most, is like all the little kind of iconographies or all the different types of storytelling that just makes something 10 times better. But it's funny when it comes to Alien though. It's actually, this may surprise you. I don't know what you're gonna say here, but do you know before the xenomorph goes full size, I was actually more scared of the smaller version than the big version, and I just find it more terrifying. I don't know if it's something to do with the design or the look, but the smaller the alien was, the xenomorph, the more terrified I was. But yeah, I had a feling you were going to go down the alien route, so I was waiting for that. Right. Because you posted a lot. I was just waiting for it.
I love, and it's one of those films I watch it time and time again,
so
just
good
to kind of make more notes. And my favorite thing is, more than anything in that film, is the visual transition from sci-fi to industry to organic to biomechanical.
Yeah.
It is, and once you heard that and you rewatch it, you're like, oh my goodness, how did I not see it?
That could be a
It's an
module in itself.
incredible piece of visual design. And to this day, there's a reason these films are still, in our vocabulary, is
Yeah,
because they're so important. And of course, there's loads of great documentation and behind the scenes stuff you can look at.
definitely.
Same with things like Blade Runner as well.
Yeah.
And then you go and look at tragedies such as Species, and you're like, yeah, that was never going to be any good. They're like awful.
If you could enter any video game, what would you choose and why?
Off the top of my head, it's probably something really cheesy.
Okay.
Like the world Final Fantasy 14 happens in.
Right, cool.
But I'm saying that knowing that I don't think it could ever be bothered to level up to ever visit the nice places that I want to visit. So I'd probably die a horrific death in those worlds. Or just stay in the cities and become a tradesperson.
Yeah.
I do love computer games, but I play less as the older I get for obvious reasons. You less time, but also
less time. Yeah.
Your quality. You've played a lot of these things before, and while the graphics get better, gameplay's kind of stagnated. I think for a while.
Still the same.
It's probably I'm gonna say it's Journey. It's probably the world of Journey.
Okay.
I want to put on that little red coat.
Yep.
I want to run across the sand dunes, tooting my way to happiness.
Yeah. I've only watched somebody play it. I've never played it. And then the other game as well you mentioned. So this always shocks people. Every guest I mention this. I've never played Final Fantasy. I've only watched it. I remember right. We were in Abertay in the final year, 4th year, and I mentioned I don't know who it was, but it was like when I said it, I just got like the look of death. Like it was just like, how dare you not play Final Fantasy? I've never played it, so I need to. One day, I say I'll play, but I don't see I'll ever play that game. But maybe
I'm gonna change your mind. You don't need to play it. Right?
Yeah,
you just don't. But you can watch it on Twitch if that's enough for you. But the thing is that these are, a lot of times it's because we grew up playing a thing. So
of course,
most people's favorite Final Fantasy tends to be the first one they played. Oddly enough, because it's usually such a mind-changing experience.
Very true.
Well, I grew up with Final Fantasy VII. I absolutely loved it. And to this day, still one of my all-time favorites because I can't deny what an unbelievably mind-blowing experience it was to visit Midgard City in the world of, I think they called it Gaia back then.
Okay.
Incredible. Just, it was something that changed your worldview. Having a PlayStation and it's this little box, and you're like, what's this do? You play it, you're not sure you even like it.
Mm-hmm.
Now you play it again because everyone's like, no, you have to keep playing it, and you eventually get hooked on it, and you're like, I've never played a game that had this much stuff going on and this quality. There's shops and there's battle systems, and then there was the cutscenes, and you're like, whoa.
Yeah, it gives the cinematics.
Oh my goodness, it's even thinking about it gives me spine tingles. Yeah. It's an unbelievably epic story that was. I'd never experienced that before, I was like, and so it was the first game that did that, so therefore it's going to stick with me more than anything. The same way Lord of the Rings blew my mind open. I was like, whoa,
you can't
what is going on with my head?
the first time I saw so I was, how old? God, I must have been like 6 when I saw Lord of the Rings for the first time. When I saw the Mines of Moria scene, it was that was the moment in the film that I was like, this is for me. It was that hype, like seeing the Balrog, seeing everything kicking off, the flames, the sound, the music, everything. Yeah. I was the only scene I was gutted that they didn't add in that scene was in the deleted scenes when the Lethril, when they in the deleted scenes you see them going past the Lethril, so the material obviously of the vest. Is it a vest? Would you say? Yeah. But that's so cool. I had no idea how the fact that they made that shot once again back 20 years ago, like 21 years ago now. Technically probably even before that, because obviously they were filming before that. They had remember the old Windows PCs? The old computers. They were brilliant. Right. Next question. If you could choose a superpower, what would you choose?
I think like there's nothing could compare to flying.
I've realized that as a pattern. Everyone's saying flying.
I've thought about that. This is a question I've thought about before. I was asked at a job interview. It was a wild card at a job interview, and I was like,
right.
It has to be flying.
Yeah, I mean, there's just
or
something magic about it.
invisibility.
Right? Okay.
Is like, we want to see things that we can't, right?
Yeah.
That's part of what we are. Being invisible allows us to go to places we can't get to, therefore see things we can't.
Yeah.
Or flying lets us get up and see things that we can't.
True.
Or reading people's minds lets us see things that we can't. That's what we're interested in.
Mm-hmm.
And very, very, very unlikely, I think, is would people pick things like, I want to be able to like kill people with one click.
Right.
It's just psychopathic, if you ask me.
So that has to be flying. No, like I'm seeing a pattern. Flying is becoming like a common occurrence. I think everyone's saying flying. We have to change up this question. Normally, I ask like who's your favorite villain to spin it up. Is that a tougher question?
Not really.
Was that easy one?
It's an interesting one because obviously, a villain done right is always an absolute beauty.
Mm-hmm. Like the
so
Joker.
What's my favorite villain? I could never say the Joker because I'm always so personally frustrated by how popular he is.
Yeah, right.
It's just like I grew up and I've seen so many versions. Like I was like, what a stupid thing. I grew up. We all grow up.
Yeah.
So what's wrong with me? But growing up and just watching so many people kind of like just gets we're all seduced by the enigmatic bad guy who's unbelievably charming yet so smilingly evil. The trickster and the jester at the same time has always been an appealing bad guy, a complex villain whose madness has driven them to villainy, because that's a possibility. The Joker is a perfect representation of someone who's broken. So in my honest opinion, I say Seeger, from No Country for Old Men. I think Seeger is the ultimate villain because he is pure chaos.
Right.
He is, and I'm convinced that Seeger is what inspired that Joker film to be made. Because watching No Country for Old Men years ago, I remember the first thing I said in the film ended went, "That's the Joker. That's a real Joker. If he ever existed in our world, that's what he'd be like. He'd be chaotic. He would be broken to the point
seen this.
of, and it's an incredible film. It's a beautiful Coen Brothers film.
Okay.
Absolutely fantastic. Very serious film, but incredible for all sorts of reasons. But he's just a monster, right?
Yeah.
This is not an action film. It has action scenes in it, but it's a thinking man's film. And that it's a great story. And it's just about the decay towards which society has gone in terms of I'm not even wording myself right. My brain's gone somewhere else now.
Hey, we've been talking for a while, so I appreciate any answers.
Is this person a lecturer? Sometimes, but it's a comment on it's just the depravity of violence in our society is definitely one of the messages, to the point where it's like this, the phrase being, this is no country for old men. How things change and move at a pace, and the brutality at which people have gone at each other. Seeger's someone that can only exist in this world. You shouldn't be able to exist, but does. Obviously he's not a real character, but there are people like him who have and do exist. And what's terrifying about him is his process. He's measured. He knows what he's doing. He's experienced, and he's extremely smart. And when you watch it and you realize that in terms of clothing and how they made Arthur Fleck in Joker, you're like, that's where they got Joker from.
Yeah.
And it's obviously they embellish it a lot more. But Seeger to me is the ultimate villain because there's no redemption. You do not redeem someone like Seeger. You kill it.
Yeah,
that's
not
great. Human.
I'm going to have to watch it because I've not seen it, so I'm missing out. No, thanks for sharing it. It's I think this question is always a breath of fresh air because everyone always talks about their favorite superheroes, but they never talk about their villains. Favorite female action character?
Oh, easy. It's Ripley.
Ripley. Oh, right. Okay, wait. Okay. Let's spin it up to make it even harder. Take Ripley out of the equation.
Because Sarah Connor.
Right. Okay. This is any other ones?
Emperador Furiosa.
Wait, who's that?
Mad Max Fury Road.
Oh, right. Okay. Yep. Charlize Theron. Yep. Charlize Theron. Great film. Were you a fan of Trinity?
Yeah.
You're a fan of Trinity, yeah. I thought Trinity was a. Here, I only came across last week, so I was doing a podcast. I had no idea that they're making a new Matrix.
Yeah.
So I've been out of a bubble for a year. Supposedly this has been in the works for a while now, and I had no idea that they're making one.
Yeah, I think there's been several attempts to get it off the floor, but it's shooting, it's filming, it's happening. I don't know what they're gonna do. I know what I would like them to do, but I'm not the one writing the script.
Yeah.
But I think it would be perfect. And if they don't do it, the film's dead to me.
Yeah.
If they can't read my mind, Ross, then no cares.
You just see you in the comments of like Rotten Tomatoes is like, this is not to par, 0 score.
Yeah. This was not what it should have been.
Yeah, exactly. Just instant savage.
No, I'm not one of those like, there's too many internet edgelords that
the Twitter warfare is about to begin.
No, I can't be like that. I first of all, I don't think it needs a sequel, but I'm interested in where it's going to go. My worry is that it's like, the Matrix was such a, early stage directors are at such a point of proving themselves. They tend to make better films because they're not surrounded by people that just nod and agree. Yeah. They have to fight for every decision they make, and it's fantastic. So whatever the Wachowski sisters come up with, I look forward to it, but I'll try my best not to read anything about it so that it is a pleasant surprise. And if it's genuinely brilliant, then great, because I haven't been excited by a film in a long time. Yeah. And I would love it to be something. If The Matrix 4 comes along and it's like genuinely brilliant, then not only will I scream about it, but I'll study it and I will make it a piece of academic literature that we all need to read.
Awesome. Great answers. Right. Last question I ask every single guest on the podcast. This question, it's always, I think, to me, it's always a highlight one because I have no idea what the guest is going to say. Favorite cartoon as a kid?
Pie and Chicken.
Wait, so I think one other person said this, and I've never heard of this. Can you explain this? Because I'm pretty certain somebody said this before. It
was the golden era of Cartoon Network when.
Okay.
Things like, obviously they were doing repeats of like Flintstones, Jetsons, Scooby-Doo.
Yep.
You were getting things like Tasmanian Devil. Like it was just all, it was
Hanna-Barbera.
All the Hanna-Barbera stuff, and then all the modern stuff such as like the New Adventures of Johnny Quest, the X-Men, Spider-Man, and then all of this gold, right? Mm-hmm. And then you switch on to Cartoon Network and you get Cow and Chicken, which is a zany cartoon show, very Ren and Stimpy styley, but not at the same time, about a cow and a chicken. I don't know how to explain it. And it has the finest. Maybe I should have picked this guy. Red Guy as the villain. Mm-hmm. A very camp, bodacious red devil character with an enormous butt. His butt's out all the time. Awesome. And this show was like, it would not get on TV today for what it got away with. Like, it's laugh out loud funny. It's so stupid and zany. And you get like moments like you had, like Cow had her doll was called Piles the Beaver. You had their auntie they had an auntie who was, I think it was the one episode that got banned was I think it was something like anti-carpet cleaner or something.
Anti-carpet cleaner?
Yeah, I can't remember. I really might be off the mark here. Yeah. Sergeant Weenie Arms, who was Chicken's favorite action man was Sergeant Weenie Arms. Right. It was just a soldier with weenies for arms, like actual sausages. And then he meets him in real life and he's an absolute hard ass. And then you've got the Red Devil guy who's the finest voice acting in all cartoon history. Okay. And it's just raw, it's plain old stupid. Yeah. Nothing else about it.
Brilliant. That is an awesome way to finish the podcast. Weenie Arms, you're sorted, folks. Only the best content here. Ryan, thank you so much for your time. It's always a pleasure having you on the show. Most importantly, folks, as always, if you want to keep up to date with everything that Ryan's doing, like I said before, check out all the links down in the description below. If you have any questions that you have for today's podcast that you want to talk about, feel free as usual to comment down in the comments section below, and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. But Ryan, thanks once again for coming on. It's been great having you.
Anytime, Ross. Thanks very much.